focused in here. That may be difficult for
Could
me.
you get closer to the
I move
microphone?
around a little bit.
Thank you.
Sure. I move around a little bit and get a little animated, so I'll try to stay put for the purpose of the recording. I actually now live have a home in Norman, Oklahoma. We did make it a little bit closer to Kansas in the Lawrence area. My wife is actually graduating this May with her nursing degree, a bachelor's in nursing, and as you can probably imagine, she's going through all kinds of. Her hair is getting thinner, and her nerves are pretty much frazzled, and she's preparing for those big tests that SE and I forget all the ones. My daughters went through the same thing. I currently have a residence as well established in Lawrence, and then I do go home. I make a priority. My family's always been my priority next to God, and so I have always. That's just it. I go to work, but when I go home, in the evenings and the weekends, and when available and appropriate, I certainly at that time is for my family. And so it's a long drive. It takes me about 4.5 hours to get there, but it's worth every second. And then of course I hustle back here and take care of my responsibilities with Haskell. And as you know, as a university president or anybody with in a leadership position such as that, it's a 24-hour job. I'm doing work on. I have all of my hands-free things that are required now if you're driving, and then I have conversations, and then of course at home I'm on the couch with my laptop. Fortunately, my wife is deep into her studies, so I don't interfere too much with family time. I have 11 grandchildren, and we try to entertain them as often and frequently as we can. It's not nearly as often as we like, but my experience at Haskell, as you were told, I began working with Haskell through another role. Actually, I was at an office in Oklahoma City, and that was primarily based upon I was in charge of administering all of the tribal college grants to all the tribally controlled universities across the country. At this time, there are a total of about 36 different ones identified. There are about 26 identified that fall under Public Law 95-471, and those I think they get cumulatively about $75 million of the budget, which I'm sure they're scrambling for as well. During that time, they had a little bit of reorganization with the Bureau of Indian Education, and which broke off from the Bureau of Indian Affairs in the Department of the Interior. So I started my experience. I left the tribal side, as the tribal folks would tell you. I left it and went to the dark side and went to work for the evil government people, and so. In some respects, I fully understand their thoughts on that one, and at other times it's been very helpful for me to be able to work from the government side to assist my tribes and Native Americans in general. So it's opened up I've had some really neat opportunities. I actually got to prepare statements and testimony for the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs. On one occasion, something I probably would have never dreamed of doing or had the opportunity of doing. My time with my tribe prepared me for that. A lot of folks think I think like a lot of us who have had office jobs or leadership positions, they think you just kind of woke up there, or you were born behind the desk or whatever. And frankly, I had quite a bit of difficult time up to that point. I was like a lot of folks. I graduated from high school in 1981, and I had to go through. I did everything backwards, like a lot of young adults. I made my family, and then I decided I needed to go to school so I could pay for all of this. And so I did a lot of jobs, as we called starvation wages. We that was back before gas was $3.50 a gallon too. So it was I think gas now. I talk to my kids and the challenges that they have with that now, and it's like another car payment actually. If you think about it, the cost it is for somebody who makes very low wages and has a family. At any rate, I worked into some different. Finally, in '88, I decided I was going to go back to school. I actually had a pastor come to me and talk me into going to Oral Roberts University. At the time, I was living in the Tulsa area. He was a graduate, a doctorate in theology, and wanted me to attend. So I actually went in with the idea or possibility of going into the ministry. And then at some point there, I made a decision to do something a little bit more marketable in regards to a professional career. I was able through this time to get into some interesting roles and jobs. I gradually led into some managerial areas, and then through the tribe, I learned a lot of things on the political landscape, and then took my first post in Washington, D.C. We basically write the government's or the president's budget. When we sit down and we talk to our Office of Management and Budget, we're basically crafting and enforcing at some point the president's budget. And so on the other side, we do find ourselves, because of the Indian preference laws within the Department of Interior, at least within Indian Affairs, many of us find ourselves advocating for Native American tribes, and regardless of whether that's on a 638 contract or has something to do with self-determination or what have you. Education, for a long time, was the Office of Indian Education Programs within the Department of Interior, or BIA. And at that time, we were still OIEP. We broke off and we were trying to become our own bureau. We were doing some restructuring, and so this is how I kind of came into, I had required some reports from Haskell at that time. All I knew about it was a college out here that had just been receiving accreditation for 10 years as a university. I had been asked to do a few more things, and then I was sort of, as they say, had my foot in the door when the sitting president at that time left and was reassigned. And so that was not in my career path. I guess it was. The Lord apparently put it in my path, so here I am. I have often asked how things worked out like they did, but I tell you, it's been a very enriching and fulfilling experience, and overwhelming, of course, at times. I still drive around the campus and wonder, how in the world I found myself responsible for so many things. Haskell has had to endure years and years of identity change. Much of it, if you look back in sort of the dark ages of Indian education, we go back to, of course, the time of the boarding school, and then it transitioned its way through the technical trades and vocational, and then into a junior college, and eventually where it is now. Funding has always been interesting as well for Haskell. When we look ahead, we have to look back, and we look at what, because one of the things that the challenges that I have as an administrator is the budget that I develop, the budget that I discuss with my faculty and my administration is something that's kind of given to us. Because one of the things that there's a few unique things about Haskell that I'll share with you. It's one of the only tribal colleges. It's the only tribal college in the country that has 100% Native American population. It's the only tribal college that doesn't charge tuition. It fulfills what we call the Indian Trust responsibility for the federal government to Native Americans. Students pay, at this point, about $215 a semester if they live on campus
2005?
Oh, I think it may have actually been before 2005. And we look at that. But the funding structure is what's interesting to understand, because I don't make more money if I get more students. As you may understand, we don't charge tuition. If I have a population increase jump up to, let's say I have an average of 970 students. By the way, we have about 134 different tribes on campus each semester. Have about 50-50 representation of male, female. The majority of our students do not come from Indian boarding schools. Many of them do come from reservations. Many of them do not return to Indian reservations. They go out into the country basically, and they develop careers, in many cases serving other Native Americans in some capacity based upon whatever tradition or whatever culture pulls them. But we have a group of students that represent probably the bottom end of as far as socioeconomical status. These students are very challenged, as well as their families, in a lot of ways, for the funds. Also, there's other correlation that go along with that as far as these students, and that is the unique challenges also that they face, maybe whether it was with the boarding school or even the public school system. We have a large number of students that come in needing remedial education, math and English and things of that nature. As most folks know, you don't get special funding for remedial, and we've, over the years, I think colleges have had to redefine what remedial means, because a lot of us have found ourselves reteaching high school. We just don't have the time. We don't have the funding. We don't. I apologize if you can't hear me. I feel fairly confident in some of the things that are going on as far as funding. Haskell has the ability now, through some new it's not actually, well, I wouldn't call it legislation, especially. There is some statutory language that we have found that allows Haskell to do two things primarily. One is to lease property on campus, which would allow us to bring in other educational opportunities to our students and other things for the campus, and also that would be a source of revenue for. And the other thing would be to fundraise in general, so we could actually look at capital campaigns and things of that. Haskell's had a foundation now. It's gone through some turbulence over the years. A lot of folks have heard. A lot of folks don't probably know all of the details, but the important thing right now is that they are liquid now. They are in the black, and they have taken care of the past. And so, for most respects, we have a few familiar names, Coach Llewellyn and a couple of others, but we have a brand new board. I say we, the foundation is a separate entity, but they have a brand new board. They just met a few weeks ago, actually, litigating, and some good, really good, solid board members that they have selected for that board. And so we're looking at some really strong interest. We've had a lot of folks contact us. We hear from, of course, some of the names that are familiar with Haskell, and Billy Mills talks to us frequently about his interest and his legacy, and we talk to some of the family of the Thorpes, and then, of course, we have some prominent folks around the community of Kansas and Lawrence and elsewhere. We have to be cognizant of the fact that there are things changing on the landscape in higher education, though, that could affect us as well overall. And the other thing to keep in mind is once Haskell does develop the ability to maybe incur revenue or develop sources of revenue, the folks in D.C. are watching that, and they say, well, you can do this, and so we have to be careful about how we work ourselves into that. But we've been on a flatline budget for years now. People, and I always tell everybody there's no such thing as a flat budget, because if you don't raise your funding to keep track of course, the expenses, as the cost of living and other things as they go up, you're really losing your spending power. We have a number of positions that we cannot fill. We constantly are like a lot of colleges, we look more to faculty and contract educators. We look more to other opportunities when we start looking at reallocation of human capital and what can we do on the campus to make it more effective. We are in the last few years of this tenure accreditation. We're examining programs, as you might imagine, and we're doing our self-assessment, self-study right now. We're having a kickoff this afternoon in the auditorium at Haskell, and we're beginning this process. And so we're looking at classes and course and programs that we have. Primarily, we have 4 right now, and we have to examine those and see, are our students coming out of Haskell with marketable degrees. There are a number of associates. There are a number of, we still have quite a few. In fact, I'm told that based upon our latest statistics, we still have between 75% and 80% of our students that are classified as 2-year students. That makes it difficult for you when the media is looking at iPads and you're reporting, and you're a 4-year cohort basically with so many 2-year students. So when they crunch the numbers, I think we've gotten, the latest number I saw, we actually had around 37%, far from what I think the Wall Street blacked our eye with a couple years ago. But one of those problems was the reporting, and we worked with them to increase that. So as many colleges are learning, you hear a lot about first-year experience. Our students generally hanging on to them as that freshman to sophomore year. And our students come to Haskell for different reasons that they do other colleges. They don't, if you're trying to get into like KU or some of the other colleges. Now, I understand KU's recently changed their admission requirements somewhat, but for the colleges that basically really have raised the admission requirements and so forth, Haskell, I would say, I guess historically have not had a lot of restrictions to getting in, other than being a member of a federally recognized tribe, and then depending on age, of course, they look at ACT, if you've taken that, and what your score is, and then where you fall in your class, and then, of course, GPA. When we look ahead, we have to start looking at, are we doing those students a service or a disservice that do come in, and we don't have the resources that they need to get them to the point, as if maybe a community college or junior college would do in the past, of kind of helping them along with that remedial need. So we look forward. We have to be. There's those challenges that we have in respect to the unique responsibility that we have different from what the Department of Ed does with all of the other colleges and schools. I got a little bit ahead of myself when I started talking a little bit about the foundation and some of the things. Let me give you a little bit, and some of you probably know this, but as a federal college, there's some unique challenges that we have. It's almost like the square peg in the round hole, the government system running. Now, it's worked fairly well with maybe some of the military colleges who have plenty of money, and they have big names that raise these, but as a rule, myself, Mr. Prue, who's a close associate to me, and anybody actually at the college who works at the college, whether you're a faculty member or if you're helping clean the dorms, or if you're watching agencies, or you can't visit with your congressman. You can on an individual basis, but you can't go in as a employee of the government or of Haskell and start talking to them about money, because that's considered lobbying. We can't even solicit our alumni. At least we have not been able to up until this point, and talk to our alumni about it. Now, there's ways that you can kind of get around that, but it's a very strict, difficult process. The other side of that is that I talked a little bit about the fee structure. Our fees cannot supplant federally appropriated dollars. That's a federal law. For a long time, Haskell was funded as a part of another budget with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and they finally got what they call our own line item in what we call the Green Book, or the federal budget, President's budget. So Haskell and Southwestern Indian Polytechnic Institute, which is out in our sister college that is out in Albuquerque, New Mexico, we have finally got our own line item, and we also wrestle with arm wrestle a little bit over some of the funds based upon square footage and students and everything else. We don't have any ability, though, to go outside of that and bring in funds. My meetings that I have from time to time, where I get to visit with Governor Brownback or maybe other representatives, I can't go in there and sit down and start talking about budgetary needs. Now, they can ask me, but I still have to be careful on how I respond to that. And so, and as I said, with the fee structure, it's a quid pro quo type thing. If I charge you a fee for $10 for laundry services, it needs to go into that area. If I've got washers and dryers in that, then that needs to go back. So any of the funding that we get will generally go back into student programs, student-sponsored programs, student clubs, and things of that nature. We can't throw it in there and help pay for faculty and other positions like that. We do have a number. We do have millions of dollars in sponsored programs and grants, but as you might imagine, most of those are earmarked for specific purposes. We can't use those either, other than, of course, what they're intended for. We've been able to do some capacity building most recently with the Title III funding that's come through, and it's been very generous in the past few years. We don't know what's going to happen with that. The sequester that recently took place hit the campus. I'm trying to watch my time here. The sequester that hit the campus, Haskell had prepared for the impact on a 5% basis. So what we did was, and I don't know that I'm really bursting anybody's bubble here, and that those of you who listen to all the pundits and watch the news, we knew about this a long time ago. We didn't know that it would actually happen. We didn't know how it was going to impact us. But when we start, we're already looking at 14 and 15, of course. 14 especially, 15. So we start talking about those years ahead. We knew when the President signed into law in 2011 the act that was going to require a balanced budget, or the spending cap, I guess I should. We knew that was on the horizon. As most said, they thought it was so unfathomable when they put it into law that nobody would dare let things get to that point. Nevertheless, we put aside, when we did budgeting for the semester, we told everybody they had what they had last year, less 5%. And so that's how we spend, and that's how we ran business. And then you had the government come in and say, yeah, but now you have to, you're talking about the possibility of mandatory furloughs and all of these things, which we had already included. Well, if the government said it was supposed to hurt, they're going to make sure that it hurts at the end of the day. And so we planned it accordingly. So when we look ahead, and I guess the gist of my conversation, about planning, what I see in two or three respects. for Haskell. And these things are what I consider to be rather pretty much groundbreaking for Haskell, certainly for a federally chartered college as we are. And that is the ability to have capital campaigns, raise funds. I see our foundation coming back to life and actually being functional. I see some changes going on. We're working real closely with our Board of Regents. Our Board of Regents sort of respond, the way our Board of Regents work with us, and that our Board of Regents is much like, and they don't like me saying this, but this is kind of the way, they're much like an advisory board. And the reason I say that is because unless you're a federal employee, you do not have any legitimate authority to set budgets, to be involved in the hiring and selection process and any of that. You can make recommendations. You can know, and as far as the transparency goes, it allows us to do a lot of things with our board. There's been some different administrators work with the board differently. I think I can give the board everything that they need to be a functional board. And so what we've seen is some manifestation over the past couple of years of some different interests. In the past, our board, and I think it's because they felt that they were just advisory. They came in, we told them all the good news and the difficult news and the bad news and everything else, and they just went back to their regions, and we didn't see them again until 6 months later. What we're seeing is a new spirit there of wanting to be involved, wanting to actually go to their regions and bring stuff back, which was the design of our board. Our board members represent the 12 different regions of the BIA. They have to live and reside and hopefully have some background in education, but they come in and generally speak from that knowledge base, but also they're supposed to bring in with them information that they've shared with their, hopefully within their region, and talk tribal consortiums or whatever they might be, and bring back some opportunity. That's not been a real ongoing practice. As I said, it's just been sort of a reporting mechanism for some time. I see a possibility of a really strong, like many colleges, particularly those who have athletic programs, an athletic foundation for Haskell. There's a lot of interest for that as well. And so there's some areas that we spend. Our athletic program is not even, when you compare it to colleges as KU and some of the other ones, it's very minuscule, the amount of money that we're talking about. But to us, it's significant. $250,000 to us pays for, a few more staff or a few more employees, or pays a few more contracts. We have the ability, if we can, for instance, subsidize the athletic program, which is not a direct mission of the college, and I have some flexibility with that, then we can do that. So I guess going back to everything, we've been unable to subsidize, we've been able to do anything that's considered supplanting or putting money into along with the appropriated funds, and now we're seeing some possibilities of doing that. What we've done from a strategic planning, and our strategic plan that's been long coming is probably going to be rolled out to the Board of Regents in October. It will be done before, in the commencement in May, and in print shortly thereafter. And so what we're looking at is just what I've explained. We're looking at 3 or 4 possibilities of revenue. I've been asked on several occasions my opinion about, is athletics really the mission of your college, and is it a core mission, and can you afford to continue paying for contractors? And there's a lot of good arguments. I could argue either side of that. As an administrator, I wrestled and played football. I did those. I think they were extremely important. A lot of our athletes that come to Haskell, whether we're winning, whether we're losing, whether we've been having good seasons or down seasons or what, they come to Haskell to play because their parents or their grandparents. They come to Haskell course, they get their education, they have to maintain that GPA to play. But you can't separate the two. I can't just pull athletics apart from the academic side, because we do lose something. It is an issue, and it is a big, a big part of what we do, and folks want to try to separate athletics from the academics, and it's just, it's not that easy. So I've committed to staying the course. I've committed to looking for ways to keep that program strong. We have to be able to, we have to be able to provide programs that's going to address all of our needs and deal with the needs of all the students as well. So that's always been my commitment. Primarily, I'm going to stop here because I think that I'm supposed to allow for a couple of questions, but I think that we're seeing some changes come forward. When I mentioned something about the change in higher education, there's more and more accountability that's being required, primarily because a huge subsidy, both to whether you're a state college or even government. These are taxpayers' dollars, and the government is more and more writing regulations and requirements on what you're going to have to answer to. I see us actually having to compete someday for our students. We don't have a whole lot of students, but we can always depend on about 1,000 students. We have many more than that, of course, that apply every year. But that's a good thing, because what it does is, as administrators, is it requires us to be looking more at student services and the customer and what we're really there for. The big problem with the government, particularly in the area of something like a university or anything else, is the status quo you get into and running things like any other bureaucratic office in the government. We have to focus on why we're there, and we have to focus on why the students are leaving, and why they're staying, why do they come in the first place, and all these things. And so that's what we need to focus on, whether we think that we have our future insured by federal dollars or not, which we don't. We have to be mindful of the fact that the only reason we're really there is to help these students succeed. If the students don't succeed, we're wasting money, and we're wasting a lot of time. And so, that's the bottom line with me. We're looking into first-year programs. We've been spending a lot of money and time and training on that. I know we're behind some of the other colleges on that, but so has our funding been. So we're looking at ways that we can make a first-year experience much different and much more positive. We're taking the campus. We have done a lot of things. We've updated. Again, I understand we're behind in a lot of respects, but we have smart boards. We have technology in our classroom that we didn't have before. We're updating furnishings and furniture. We're trying to get this thing stop looking like an institution and have it look like a university and a home for these students, because that's basically what it is for a while. So anyway, I'll stop at this point, and then I guess open up if anybody has any questions for me.
Dr. Redman, you've got a world-class library that I didn't hear that much about. I know Dr. Russell just recently retired, but I've been impressed with that as another Douglas County resource.
Yes. One of the things that she did when Dr. Russell went out, she made us promise we wouldn't turn it digital, and so my grandmother used to say anybody old is older than me. So, and she said that up until she was 85, and so that's still with me though, and I'm just about to turn 50 this year. I still like the books. It is an excellent resource. In fact, one of the things that we've done with the library, and there's been a lot of discussion, is the connection between our library and our cultural center. Because one of the things we have over there, and a lot of folks don't know about, because it's a small building, and you wouldn't believe the enormous amount of resources that it has in there as far as documentation. But Dr. Russell decided finally to retire. We missed her before she ever walked out the door. She's still around, but did an excellent job, and it is a tremendous resource. I would hope that folks would pass that word and have folks come out there and visit our library. Thank you.
How difficult is it for you to recruit strong faculty, particularly maybe faculty who have tribal backgrounds? And a related question is, where is Haskell at in terms of integrating into each classroom some emphasis on traditional cultures?
Yeah. When we talk about acculturating, I guess our pedagogy and all the interesting thing about, I guess a lot of people don't take into account that a lot of the tribes that I would say the tribes that we work with, the students and their backgrounds, many of these tribes' cultural and traditional backgrounds are as different as other cultures and other races. And so that has always been a difficult, I guess, sort of a conundrum also at times. And how do you bring this into the classroom, and how do you, how broad do you make that focus? How do you apply that, and how do you acculturate those things? So what we try to do, and I'm glad you asked the question, because and I know it was two parts, but the issue about the pedagogy is there's two schools that I know about that seem to be the strongest, or at least two opinions. One of those has to do with the fact that we have a degree and emphasis in American Indian Studies. We're also looking at, we've had a sort of a pilot project going alongside of that, and as a liberal arts studies. The past president, whom I agree with in some respects, in some we differ, but felt that it was very important to have that integrated throughout your teaching and your pedagogy rather than just. So there's not one right or wrong way. I think it's very important, however. What a lot of people don't understand is students do not come to Haskell to learn how to be Indian. They do not come to, but on the other hand, there is an emphasis and there is a study that we have in this degree that they can come in and look at Indian law, look at a lot of the history, and they do learn some very rich subjects in there. But I think we're getting closer. I think some of that happened under Dr. Warner. The ability to draw the faculty. One of the things that we have the ability to do under federal, I guess, Title V law, and that's in respect to human resources and what we have to follow. We of course have the Indian preference, which allows us to target. That doesn't always mean you're going to get somebody who's, I've worked with some folks on the tribal and government side that were not at all, had not a drop of Native American blood in them, and were excellent in respect to acculturation and talking about some of this history. I've worked with some folks that are 3/4 Indian blood and aren't that effective. So that's, so I think we're doing better. I think the funding is always an issue. But, one of the things that we have, and I think we in all honesty, we probably have taken that for granted at times, but we've been very fortunate, very blessed. The folks that we've had there, I know they could go other places for more money. They've stayed there. They've retired. They come back and work, volunteer their time. So I don't know how you identify a commitment, but I tell you, we but under Title V, we're also having some other avenues and some abilities to. We were able to raise the amount that we can offer them, which is often we're competing, and it's not easy being in right down the road from another college where they could go that has a great program also, international program, and a program that works with Native Americans. So Any other questions?
I was wondering, are you increasing the collaboration with KU and Haskell?
In my what? I'm sorry?
Collaboration between the two?
Yes.
You.
We have several, I guess, sort of layers to where we collaborate and work with KU. KU has always been a strong support for Haskell in regards to articulation and matriculating students through, offers some excellent opportunities for our students. Kansas State Regents has an opportunity for students who have been enrolled at Haskell to attend KU with residential status. And then we have a number of other agreements. KU provides a lot of technical support for us. They come out and help us do everything from, they spend research dollars. We have several grants and sponsored programs that we work with that KU has either authored or a part of or written in on. So we do a lot of work, and KU has been very supportive of Haskell.
Yeah. It was unfortunate when we lost the Anthropology Museum, because that's where we had taken a great many things that we brought from Native American burial sites.
Right.
And these were the cultural artifacts. Flint chipping to make arrows. People were looking at that because they could see them. Well, of course, that stuff's all locked up somewhere.
Right.
So we lost the anthropology stuff. It had many of these artifacts that were part of the survival. In other words, bow and arrow hunting. What else were you going to do if you wanted meat in any form? How did you get it? You got it with bow and arrow, or you went to the river and you found what was there. But
right. You know, we talked a little bit about the cultural center there at Haskell, and we've got there's items down. We actually have the Smithsonian from Washington D.C.
Right.
And they share a lot of
that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we would have nothing.
That's right. You know, we have a lot of there was actually a law put into effect a few years ago that actually made Haskell
flint chipping to make arrows. Actually, how do you do it?
Right. So watching the process and seeing how
right.
that's done. Yeah. I agree. I'm sorry.
You haven't said particularly much about academic programs. Do you foresee any trends in demand for or need for your academic programs changing?
I do. Since I'm not a faculty member and I have a pretty fair relation with our faculty senate, I have tried to do what any administrator would do, and that's simply impress upon them to look at trends. There's been a couple of things that have come up over the past few years. Some of them got some media attention and things of that nature, but we have tried to, we actually entertain the idea of having Higher Learning Commission come out and do a focused look at a couple of things. One was in the area of health, of a health degree, whether that was, and I don't know at this point what it would amount to. And then, of course, the other one actually was a liberal arts program. But the other thing I'm also hearing is more interest in business-related accounting, some more emphasis in some business areas. What's the other big one we always...
social work education?
Yeah, we actually have had some folks want to come out there and do things in social work therapy. So to answer your question, I have asked, when we had a recent discussion, we started talking about this self-assessment. I said, I don't want to wait 2 years until they come out here and look at things. I kind of want to know what we're seeing right now. And there's two things about it. You can have a bang-up, elementary ed program, which I believe we do, but if you're not graduating students, or if they're not, well, first they have to come in and apply for the program and then go through. But the numbers are relatively lower than I would like for them to be. I think it's an excellent program. But the issue is if would we draw more students, or do we have a bigger need for something else? And that's the questions that we need to be asking.
Since you mentioned the anthropology collection, I just recently found out more about that. And for anyone who doesn't already know, the Natural History Museum has that collection. They've been rotating exhibits from the collection in the Natural History Museum and doing occasional exhibits across at Spooner, where the Anthropology Museum used to be. And the things that aren't on exhibit are accessible by special request for people to study them.
Thank you. We have I think what I started to say was we have actually one of the ladies over the Smithsonian actually comes out and helps us do our inventory each year. And we were always wrestling with the idea of how do we staff that? Do you need a museum curator? Do you need a cultural center director, or what? And she says, oh no. She says, you have, this may be a small building, but how many pieces do you recall?
Yeah, we have 15,000 artifacts in our cultural center and over 1 million documents, all Haskell history, all related to Haskell.
The basement is chock full.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And then the thing about the basement, which as far as from a cultural perspective, is I went down in there and looked around, and there are actually some things that are spiritually sensitive in nature. In other words, we actually have little stools and little things that actually belong to some of the students that lived in the dorms years and years and years ago. And these were the same during the same era where we lost students, and so some of this sort of dark side, the train tracks, that used to, they actually brought the students in, and this didn't just go on the first couple of years. This was during the boarding year period, but they brought them in. We had somebody bring up a little box, and we didn't know what it was, and they said this was. So we brought in and opened up, and it had a little bitty set of it looked like handcuffs, and they were about this big around for little kids. So there's a lot of things that are very sensitive in nature that are down there, and so we have to kind of in order for us to make that, because what we'd like to do is make it more open to public, those things that are appropriate. There are actually some things, in my opinion, you look at repatriating and some of these, because we do have folks bring this, they think that's they're being conscientious about, they picked this up somewhere. We've had some really neat boxes of the old tin time pictures and some of the other stuff that are just amazing. And so we're still going through that. And the letters, people can come down and go into this one room, especially if you had family in there, and we'll do the research for you, or you can do it. And they can actually go through the letters, and we still have a lot of letters that the kids were writing back home when they were there, so it's pretty good.
And many of those are digitized, and you can go to our library and view them, too, so.
What did the Smithsonian person say about having someone to curate the collection?
I'm sorry. She said that we needed to, she told us that, she said that the GSA, she gave us everything to the grade that the person should be in fact, we sent the position description, the PD, out there to her and let her edit it. And so now we're in the thrust of all of these freezes on hiring and freezes on I've got a higher learning commission meeting in Chicago in a couple of weeks, and I had to get special permission to go to that. And so they said it was definitely a museum, and they said that we definitely had seen somebody of the caliber that could watch over that.
So it's a curatorial position?
Yeah. You need someone like that for collection.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that there was a two-year...
I'll get you just a minute.
A two-year program that the students came for. what happens to them after 2 years?
They can go ahead and apply ahead for the 4-year. They can stay into or move into a 4-year program, or they can just get their 2-year. I'll be honest with you. I'm sorry.
What do they do with it after 2 years?
An associate's degree?
Okay.
Yeah, it just depends on what. In my opinion, well, I mean,
The same thing that people who graduate from Johnson County do after their
exactly.
They go out in the world and work.
You either go out and work, or you try to add to it. Because of the ability for the students to come in and get their education with I guess within a budget that meets their capacity, oftentimes they will step on out to maybe KU or go. We have Syracuse, Purdue. We have students that we've had a couple go to Harvard because of their Native American program, but that makes it tough when in a college when you're looking at graduation rates and retention rates. The government's getting ready. There's some discussion going on right now, I think, with Obama's administration and talking about looking at different ways. They talk about the core requirements, but they're also looking at ways. They were doing this. I think he mentioned this in one of his speeches when he first came to office, and that he was going to look at ways to evaluate progress. Because what a lot of schools don't get credit for is the progress that they have with the student when the student turns and does not complete their degree there, and they go to the next college or they go somewhere else, or they may leave school. But generally speaking, a student may be very successful at a college, go up to the junior year, the sophomore year, they fall out of the cohort and they go somewhere else. And up until recently, with the clearinghouse and all some of these other things we have, it's been very difficult to sort of follow that. But it doesn't look good. Somebody's had their hand up back there a couple times. Let me go with him first.
How do you select students to come to your university?
Okay.
And deal with the culture shock. Many of them are coming off the reservation and going to a big city for the first time. That's something I've heard about. I was wondering, how do you deal with selecting and also about helping them make the adjustments?
Well, those are all very good questions. The students apply and are generally looked at upon a first-come, first-served basis. We go through the applications, and we don't, but with the exception of looking at if they meet the minimum GPA requirements and class setting and things of that nature. The big challenge is not getting them here, it's keeping them, and what you just addressed, and that is, what do you do when they get here and they're way out of their element? Now, I don't know, I don't know what the percentage of students that actually do come from reservations. But the biggest thing we look at when they come out is a disciplinary issue. And I don't mean discipline as far as getting into trouble. I mean living on their own, being disciplined with their resources. And so what we have to do, and this is actually what we're talking about right here. This is what we're doing in preparation for that, because we have to look more savvy. We've been doing years, I think, in post-secondary education, been testing and gathering information for years, but we haven't really, in my opinion, either done much with it or been able to do, because it's such a challenge. We try to address, so what we do is we look at more hands-on ways that we can be at that student's disposal during this time and when they're coming in and acclimating to this new environment. Sometimes you can do everything possible, I say, and you're not going to change the inevitable for them. In other respects, I think that and I would say that those are the exception. I'd say that we can do so much more as far as bringing them in, meeting them at their need, understanding we have early warning systems to where students come in and run into difficulty. We let them fall through the cracks and get in trouble or get in a bind before we do anything, and sometimes, in some cases, not doing anything at all. Our Blackboard and our student systems is something that I think colleges, even the big colleges, have not used universally in a way that's most effective, so that we can watch when students are getting online. We have an online age of students now, so it's not that hard to watch what they're doing if you know where to look. And so in order to help them, we have to change our classroom. We have to. There's a lot of substance that can be gathered outside and out of the classroom. When they come in, we spend more time engaging the students. And so these are all. There's a lot of technical words and terminology, but if you want to know my opinion, I think we haven't done a good enough job. I think most colleges would tell you that. I think we're onto something, and I think that the future looks much better in that respect because we're learning new ways to engage students and to watch what's going on with them and to be more of a resource for them. And yes, ma'am.
I just wondered, because it's such an unusual school, and there is a big challenge of their coming from all these places, and I just wondered if there were any way you could have sort of a more town and gown kind of thing, and, like I think a lot of the people in Lawrence would like to get to know the students. The ones I've gotten to know, it's been very rich experience, wonderfully enviable. I just wondered, it must be incredibly lonely coming from maybe thousands of miles away, and if there were any way you could have families, maybe through churches, families could sign up to be a host family, and then have some kind of relationship, like have kids come over on Sunday afternoon and for pizza and just so that maybe some of the kids wouldn't want it, they wouldn't like it, but if they wanted to, they could have some kind of possibility of having some kind of, adults that cared about them, that were interested in their progress, that they could relate to, so they have a little more something.
Sure.
And it would be helpful for the people in Lawrence to get to know the students, too.
And this is two ways. I hear students come into my office and sit down and get to talking about what they like to do as outreach and to let the community know that. I'm quoting some comments that we're just not drunken Indians or stupid Indians or all this. And so the students often, I say, do you understand that? Every opportunity that you get to go out in the community, whatever we do, that's your witness, as we say, and your opportunity. And so, but the students have that desire, is what I'm trying to say, to get out, and they want to do things. In fact, there's some things that we do on campus throughout the year that is actually opened up to the community to try to bring them, because the students have a great interest in showing the community their culture and talking about Haskell. They have a great deal of pride. The wetlands has been as much of a bane, a problem it's been for the the community in general, and some of the folks that have tried to get this through. The students have thrived in the opportunity to stand out up and learn and share. And it's all, the mistake is that this idea, it's just this militant attitude out there that, students don't want this, and it's not true. The students may not want a highway or an interstate going through the wetlands, but that's not the only issue there. The students want to have that connection. So I think that one of the things we could do with the community of Lawrence, and I think we do this pretty well with the University of Kansas in some ways, but also with the community, the Chamber of Commerce. We've had opportunities to work with some business leaders, is to open up some opportunities. People have been very welcoming and open to doing those sort of things. One of the things we're trying, this may seem like a sort of a small thing, but since we're the government, we're going to take advantage, like the Light Center did. We're going to put a digital sign out there closer by the road. And that's kind of our connection, letting the folks know. Now, we were talking to the city manager a few weeks ago about the banners they're wanting to put on the new bridge, or the new, over here by 23rd, and we talked a little bit about I wanted to put up some signage out there, but I wanted to put a digital signboard out there that talked about everything from our graduation dates and activities and games and scores and things that faculty were accomplishing and students were accomplishing and all this stuff. This is our sort of a connection. And so, of course, the manager tells me that I guess you can, you're the government, that we can't really tell you not to. I said, well, I tell you what, we'll compromise. We won't make it too small, big, or too wide. It probably won't be anything quite the size that the Light Center has, but we're really talking about something like that. So, you know, I think a great deal of it has to do with things like this and just the connection and some of the communication.
Well, since you brought up the traffic way, I'm wondering, you're talking about ambivalence in the Native American community about the solution that it seems that this is a done deal. Is that right? That they've agreed on an alignment and it's going through?
That's what the news said. I tell you, and it's a fair question. You know, I get asked a lot, particularly Rotary Club meetings that I talk to. You know, and the best answer to that is that I don't have. I have an opinion as an individual, but that's not as a federal employee. Haskell has never taken a position on it. Haskell students may, the Haskell faculty have. You know, we support their right to petition and argue these things, but the federal government can't take a position on it because I can't. And so I get asked, you know, I think some lady just bluntly came out and said, when is this highway going to go through? And I said, first she called it the SLT, and I just looked at her kind of funny, and I hadn't been in, I knew about the South Lawrence Traffic Way, but I wasn't familiar with the acronym. But the answer was, I don't know. You know, we really, honestly, I got a letter to sign when they asked me for an extra 10 feet on this easement, or when they did the side the road. I signed it. And in fact, when they had trouble getting it to go through, I called the folks up in Washington, D.C. and asked them to get these papers so we could sign. So we've done everything we can in regards to something like that. Now, that didn't encroach on any wetlands. The thing that we've tried to do with the wetlands in respect to what has happened, in other words, what the court has made the decision on, is I have included my the community on campus that's interested in this, of course, and Natural Sciences Department, and I brought them out. When they wanted to know, the first time when they knocked down the dam and there was dead animals all over the 31st Street because they were getting out, there was no more water, they were looking for, I got contacted immediately, and of course the apologies and all that, and so I said, next time if you have to do that because of the berm or the shoulder on the highway, the issue was it's coming up and it's jeopardizing the water. It was getting too high along the side of the road, and it's going to jeopardize that base, the road base. So I said, if you're going to have to do it, the best thing to do is at least let these folks be involved in it. And they all went out there, they took a good look at it. Dr. Wildcat and all of they went out there and they took a look at it and they came up with a solution on how to do it. And then when they decided to do it, they didn't have any problems. So that's what we've tried to do is that, you know, if you can't stop it, at least allow the group to be a part of the solution. And they obviously don't think that the highway is the solution, but at least let them be involved in some of that. Thank you.